Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. For those that are new to my YouTube channel, subscribe immediately to see more content, and also leave a comment down below to suggest more amazing kinds of videos. Bring in part 11 of What If Spider-Man MCU entered Damnchi. Link down in description of the fan fiction This What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 21. Labyrinth Utopia, the Under Resort. The descent was fast. Too fast for any low-level adventurer, Peter thought. Belle wouldn't have been able to keep up. They moved side by side through the dungeon corridors, boots striking stone in a steady rhythm as they headed toward the Under Resort. Tiona treated the trip like a warm-up jog, long, easy strides, posture relaxed, as if they were heading out for a meal instead of pushing deeper into the dungeon. Which, Peter supposed, they kind of were. He had no trouble keeping pace, though he was pushing himself slightly. Tiona wasn't, not even close. They were on the 12th floor now, and the fog was thick here. It rolled across the corridors in heavy sheets, clinging low and swallowing the walls after only a few meters. Sound carried strangely, footsteps echoed wrong, breaths felt louder than they should have. Peter's spider sense hummed faintly. Not danger yet, just awareness. Then, Ruar, an orc burst out of the fog directly in their path, massive frame surging forward, tusked mouth wide as it charged. Peter barely had time to register it. Tiona didn't even slow. She pivoted on one foot and kicked. No wind-up, no technique. Just a casual, brutally efficient side kick. The impact landed with a deep, thunderous crack. The orc didn't fall, it launched. Its entire body shot sideways like it had been struck by a siege weapon, vanishing into the fog as it flew, 80, 90, a full 100 feet, before disappearing entirely. A heartbeat later, a distant boom echoed through the floor. The fog didn't merely part. It ripped open, a long, clean tunnel carved straight through it by the force of the kick, mist scattering violently before slowly creeping back in. Silence followed. Peter slowed to a stop, staring down the corridor, then at Tiona. Wow, Tiona grinned, rolling her ankle as if she'd just stretched. Ha, didn't even explode. Guess I misjudged the angle. Peter let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His gaze flicked back to where the orc had vanished, then down to her leg. She hadn't even strained. You were holding back during our fight, he said slowly. Tiona blinked, then burst out laughing, loud and carefree. Well, yeah, obviously. He looked at her again. Really looked this time. During their duel, she'd been fast, strong, skilled. But this wasn't just stronger than him. This was an entirely different league. You could have ended that fight whenever you wanted, Peter said. Tiona shrugged, still smiling. That wouldn't have been fun. Finn warned me not to hurt you anyway. Then she stepped closer and looped her arms around his. Besides, I'm glad I lost. He already knew what that meant. You won me fair and square, she continued brightly. Just like a fairy tale. Outsmarted the Amazon, took her heart. She leaned into him, clearly pleased with the outcome. And Peter accepted it, just as naturally. They fell back into step, the dungeon stretching ahead of them. Tiona glanced sideways at him, eyes lingering on his face a moment longer than necessary. Hey, she said casually, why are you wearing that mask anyway? Peter hesitated. He considered a dozen answers, and discarded all of them. He couldn't tell her about the HUD. Couldn't tell her about Jane. Finally, he sighed lightly. Remember when you told me not to share my secrets with you? That if I did, you'd be forced to pass them on to your goddess. Tiona blinked. Yeah, let's just say the mosque's part of those secrets, Peter said. That's the safest answer I can give. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat, Tiona's bright expression faltered. Then she smiled again, wide and cheerful, just like always. Well, she said brightly, at least you look cute in it. Peter noticed it then, the brief mismatch between her smile and her eyes. Mia's words came back to him, unbidden. Tiona hides her grief behind smiles. Keeps things loud, keeps things light, makes sure everyone's laughing so no one stops to ask how she's really doing. He walked beside her in silence, letting the moment pass. By the time they crossed into the 13th floor, Peter's spider sense suddenly spiked. He reacted instantly, leaping sideways. A jet of fire tore through the space he'd just occupied, scorching the stone. Tiona didn't even bother dodging. The flames splashed against her bare skin and vanished, breaking apart harmlessly as if they'd hit solid rock instead of flesh. Peter landed, already drawing his short swords. Shapes rushed from behind broken rock formations and corridor bends, hellhounds, low and fast, jaws glowing as they spat fire while charging. Tiona moved. She blurred forward, not fast, instant. The hellhounds didn't get a second breath. Bones snapped, bodies were crushed, torn apart, or sent flying before Peter could even track her movements. The pack barely had time to react before it collapsed into smoke and fading embers. A few stragglers broke formation, trying to circle wide. Peter met them head-on. Steel flashed. One blade took a throat, the other pierced a skull. He twisted, kicked off the wall, and finished the last two in quick, efficient motions before their fire could fully form. Silence settled again. Tiona glanced back at him, tilting her head slightly. "You're not wearing salamander wool." Peter wiped his blades and looked up. "Salamander what?" She sighed, resting her hands behind her head. "Sometimes I forget you're still a rookie adventurer." Seeing his confusion, she explained, "Salamander wool's a spirit-blessed material. It's treated with a fire spirit's blessing, repels heat, weakens flame magic, that kind of thing." Peter glanced at her outfit, which, objectively speaking, amounted to little more than a bikini. "Are you wearing it?" he asked. Tiona grinned. "Of course, you just can't see it. Most high-level adventurers have it woven into their clothes." She shrugged easily. "Too many fire-type monsters deeper down. And some floors are basically ovens." Then she added, casual and confident, "Though honestly, even if I wasn't wearing any, those attacks wouldn't have hurt me." She looked back toward where the hellhounds had been. "They're way too low-level to pose any kind of threat to me." Peter slowly sheathed his swords, eyes lingering on the scorched stone. Yeah, different league. They hadn't gone much farther when Tiona slowed, coming to an easy stop. Peter almost walked past her before noticing what had caught her attention. Set into the floor of the passage, towards the edge, was a wide, jagged hole, its edges worn smooth by time and use. It plunged straight down into darkness, warm air drifting up from below. Tiona peered down for a moment, then smiled. "Niece, we can use this as a shortcut." Peter stepped closer, careful not to get too near the edge. He looked into the shaft, but couldn't see the bottom. "What is this?" he asked. "Natural drop shaft," Tiona replied casually. "The dungeon starts making them on the middle floors. Lets adventurers skip entire floors." Peter watched the darkness for another heartbeat. "Is it safe?" Tiona glanced back at him and laughed. "Only risky if you're low level." She straightened, rolling her shoulders. "For us, totally fine." Before he could say anything else, she stepped forward. And jumped. "Woo," her voice echoed as she vanished into the shaft. Peter exhaled slowly. Of course, he moved to the edge and followed a moment later, dropping into the darkness. As gravity took hold, he fired thin strands of webbing, letting them catch briefly along the stone to bleed off speed. Not stopping the fall, just controlling it. His boots hit solid ground with a muted thud. Tiona was already there. She stood a short distance away, hands on her hips, completely relaxed, not even breathing hard. She grinned when she saw him land. "Took you long enough," she said lightly. "Keep up, slowpoke." Peter straightened, brushing dust from his suit, eyes flicking once to the height they'd fallen from. "A little warning next time would be nice," he said. Tiona laughed, already turning and heading deeper into the dungeon. A little later, as they proceeded deeper, a thunderous roar rolled through the passage. Peter shivered involuntarily. Heavy footsteps followed, each one making the stone beneath their feet tremble. From the fogless corridor ahead emerged a towering humanoid monster, its massive frame capped with the head of a bull. A minotaur. Peter raised a hand sharply, stopping Tiona before she could move. He stepped forward instead. He wanted to face it himself, the monster that had pushed Belle to the brink. The minotaur snorted, scraping one hoof against the floor before charging. Peter slipped aside with ease, bringing one of his short swords up to intercept. Crack. The blade split apart on impact. Peter's eyes widened, but his spider sense screamed a warning. He twisted away just in time as the minotaur's massive backhand tore through the air where his head had been. So that's how tough it is. Without hesitation, Peter drove his remaining sword upward, jamming it straight into the monster's eye. The blade pierced deep, into the brain. The minotaur collapsed instantly. The sword shattered with the fall, leaving only the hilt in Peter's hand, the broken blade still lodged in the creature's skull. "Damn it," Peter muttered, staring at the ruined weapons. I just bought those swords. Tiona crossed her arms, unimpressed. Low-level weapons won't last on these floors. You should at least be using level 2 gear. She tilted her head, studying him. Normally, adventurers avoid higher-level weapons because it reduces their Excelia gain, but you're not normal. You're way too strong for level 1 equipment. She reached to her side, drew her dagger, and held it out to him. Peter blinked. I can't take that, it's yours. I'm lending it, Tiona said easily. Give it back after you buy proper weapons. Besides. Her grin widened. It's not like I need weapons this high up. As if on cue, another minotaur burst from the corridor, roaring as it charged. Tiona stepped forward and thrust her hand out, fingers straight. Her arm plunged clean through the monster's chest. She ripped out its crystal core in a spray of dust, tossing it to Peter with a smirk as the minotaur disintegrated. See, Peter stared for a heartbeat. Then he turned back to the minotaur he'd killed and knelt beside the corpse. Using Tiona's dagger, he cut into its chest. The blade slid through flesh with surprising ease, almost effortless. He reached in and pulled free the crystal core. He paused, glancing at the weapon in his hand. Yeah, his swords really were junk. They ran into a few more minotaurs after that. With Tiona's dagger in hand, Peter cut them down with almost unsettling ease. The weapon wasn't just sharp, it was excessive, slicing through thick hide and dense muscle as if the monsters were made of paper. It was a weapon meant for far deeper floors. Then Jane's voice chimed softly in his ear. X-ray radiation detected. Peter halted. His HUD highlighted a section of dungeon wall ahead, stone that looked solid, untouched. He stepped forward, dagger ready. The wall cracked. Stone split apart as a tiger-like monster forced its way through, claws scraping rock as it began to emerge. Peter didn't wait. He drove the dagger into its neck before it was even halfway out. The monster went limp instantly. He dragged it fully free and began extracting its crystal core. Tiona waited without comment. Loki Familia rarely bothered with crystals this high up. Too little return for the effort. But for a small, or growing, Familia, these cores mattered. Her gaze lingered on Peter for a moment longer than before. She had heard something, a faint sound, like a voice, right before he moved. Before the wall cracked, before the monster appeared. Not something she understood. The question flickered at the edge of her mind. Just what are your secrets, Peter? She crushed the thought before it could grow. Whatever his secrets were, she couldn't let Loki learn about them. Even if, deep down, she knew that hiding anything from her goddess was almost impossible. Especially once Loki decided something was interesting. They kept moving. The 17th floor opened up around them, wide, bare, unnervingly empty. No monsters, no movement, just stone and silence. Peter's footsteps echoed in the open space. He slowed half a step, eyes sweeping the floor on instinct. Why is it so empty? He asked. Tiona didn't even look around. Boss floor. Peter blinked. Huh, she nodded as they walked. Only thing that spawns here is the monster Rex. Goliath. When it's been killed, nothing else shows up until it comes back. Peter looked across the vast chamber, unease crawling up his spine. A single enemy, and it owns the entire floor. This place really did feel like some kind of RPG dungeon. They moved on. Stone corridors carried them downward, the oppressive weight of the upper floors gradually loosening. The air changed first, cooler, cleaner, carrying a faint scent of water and greenery that had no business existing this deep underground. The walls widened, the ceiling rising higher with every step, until the tunnel finally opened. And Peter stopped. The dungeon fell away. Above them stretched a ceiling so vast it mimicked the open sky itself, an endless dome of crystal and stone glowing with soft, sun-like light. Massive crystalline formations hung overhead like frozen constellations, refracting warmth and color across the cavern below. The light wasn't harsh or artificial, it felt alive, like daylight filtered through clouds. Below, the world bloomed. Forests of towering trees spread across rolling terrain, their leaves shimmering faintly as if dusted with starlight. Clear lakes mirrored the glowing ceiling above, their surfaces broken only by slow-moving streams that wound through the land. Crystal growths erupted naturally from the ground, blue, white, and gold, casting gentle reflections across moss-covered stone and grass that shouldn't have been able to grow, but did. Far in the distance, carved directly into the rock face, rose a town, stone buildings stacked and terraced, bridges and walkways weaving through natural cliffs. Adventurers moved through it like ordinary people in a peaceful village, their presence grounding the impossible scene in reality. Peter's breath caught. This wasn't a dungeon floor. This was a hidden world. All his expectations, dark corridors, monsters, danger, collapsed in the face of it. The dungeon hadn't just changed scenery. It had changed rules. The sheer scale of the cavern made him feel small in a way that wasn't threatening, but humbling. Like stepping into a cathedral carved by something far older and far greater than reason. Peter reached up and slipped his mask off, tucking it into his belt as he took in the view. For a long moment, he simply stood there, eyes tracking the curve of the glowing ceiling, the slow drift of light across the crystal sky, the impossible calm of it all. He hadn't expected beauty down here. Not like this. Not buried beneath layers of stone and death and blood. Tiona watched his reaction and smiled. "Welcome to the Under Resort," she said. "This was my surprise." Peter let out a slow breath. "A safe zone, down here." She nodded. "No monsters spawn, ever." He looked around again, more deliberately this time, the vast crystal ceiling like an artificial sky, the forests and lakes stretching out beneath it, the town carved into the rock face in the distance, alive with people instead of danger. "This," a quiet laugh escaped him. "This is a really nice surprise. I didn't expect anything like this in the dungeon," he added. "Not even close." They wandered for a while, unhurried, taking in the sights. Their conversation drifted easily, small things, idle remarks, laughter slipping in naturally. After a time, Peter glanced at her. "Hey, can you tell me more about yourself?" he asked. "What you did before you came to Orario?" For just a heartbeat, something passed over Tiona's face. A shadow, quick, but unmistakable. "Maybe later," she said. Then, almost immediately, her grin snapped back into place, bright and energetic, the shift too fast to be natural. "Hey," she said suddenly, eyes lighting up. "Can you do that thing again? Swing around with your webs, like when you took me up the Tower of Babel." Peter followed her gaze upward. The ceiling was far above them, hundreds of feet high, glowing like a crystal sky. Well beyond the range of his web shooters. But those weren't what he was using anymore. "Maybe," he said slowly. He raised his hand, fingers instinctively forming the familiar pose, and focused. "Arachnostrand," magic answered. A strand of shimmering web shot upward, and kept going. And going. It ignored gravity, momentum, common sense, stretching farther than any synthetic line ever could. Peter felt the connection clearly, like an extension of his thoughts. He willed it faster. It obeyed. A few seconds later, the web anchored itself to the distant ceiling. Peter glanced back. "Hop on." Tiona didn't hesitate. She leapt onto his back, legs locking firmly around his waist. Peter quickly wove a few additional strands, creating a snug harness that held her securely and comfortably in place. "Ready?" he asked. She grinned. "Always." With a thought, the web contracted. They launched into the air. For Peter, this was it, the best part about being Spider-Man. The speed, the acceleration, the freedom, the rush flooded through him instantly, washing away everything else. His magic strands responded perfectly, lengthening and snapping taut with every mental command. He was moving faster than he ever had with his synthetic webs, clean arcs, flawless transitions, pure momentum. The wind tore past his face, cool and exhilarating, fingers threading through his hair. No mask, no city skyline, just open space and light. He fired another line and pulled hard. "Woohoo!" Peter shouted, laughter ripping free. A heartbeat later, Tiona's voice joined his, just as loud. "Woohoo!" She loved it. He could feel it in the way she leaned into the swings, how she laughed without restraint. At the peak of one arc, Peter released the line and flipped. One somersault, then another. Tiona instinctively tightened her grip. Peter reacted instantly, firing the next web line. "GHK, Tiona, you're crushing me." Peter gasped. She loosened instantly, laughing. "Oops, sorry, forgot you're still a squishy level 1. Peter snorted, and answered launched into a triple somersault, spinning effortlessly through the air before firing the next web line and snapping it taut. Tiona screamed, pure joy in her voice. They kept going, faster, higher. Peter threaded web after web, his magic responding effortlessly, smoother and stronger than anything he'd ever built by hand. For a while, there was nothing but laughter, wind, and motion. Then, subtly, the edge dulled. His head buzzed, just a little. His thoughts slowed, the familiar heaviness creeping in. Mind drain. He eased the next swing. Hey, Tiona protested, why are you slowing down? Running out of mind, Peter admitted. She scanned the area quickly, then pointed. There, land by those trees. Peter guided them down, releasing the final strand as they dropped lightly toward the glowing greenery below, heart still racing, smile still wide, the echo of laughter lingering in the crystal-lit air. Peter quickly dispelled the harness, and Tiona hopped off effortlessly. You okay? She asked, eyes scanning him briefly. Yeah, Peter said, fishing a small vial from his bag. He downed a mind potion in one gulp and felt its warmth spreading instantly. He smiled, good as new. Tiona smirked and tugged him toward the nearest cluster of trees. Come on, try this, she said, plucking a strange, fluffy-looking fruit from a low branch. Peter raised an eyebrow as she handed it over. He bit into it, and a burst of sweetness exploded across his tongue. It was light, airy, and almost melted in his mouth, with a rich honeyed flavor that lingered pleasantly. Whoa, he murmured, eyes widening. This tastes amazing. What is it? Tiona chuckled, twirling the fruit in her hand. Honey cloud, she said. You only find it here. Peter took another bite, savoring the texture. It's kind of like cotton candy back home, but even sweeter. Tiona blinked. Cotton candy, Peter grinned. It's just a treat. Sugar spun into a fluffy cloud. You wouldn't know it, it's not common here. For the next few minutes, they wandered among the trees, plucking honey clouds and tasting them. Peter tried to grab the biggest one he could find, only for Tiona to snatch it first with a teasing grin. Hey, that one looked perfect, he protested, laughing. Tiona popped it into her mouth, crumbs sticking to her lips. Too slow, slowpoke, she said, nudging him gently with her shoulder. Peter shook his head, smiling, and plucked another. All right, you win this round. They continued like that for a while, sharing bites of the sweet, airy fruit and laughing quietly, enjoying each other's company. Finally, Tiona wiped her hands on her clothes and looked at him with a bright grin. Come on, let's head to the town, she said, joking, it's my treat after all, and you'd think I'm a miser if I only fed you fruit for lunch. Peter grinned. Hop on. Tiona didn't hesitate. She grabbed hold, laughing, and a moment later they were airborne, webbing snapping forward as they swung toward the town in a wide, effortless arc. As the town drew closer, Peter noticed movement there. A few adventurers had stopped, heads tilting upward, fingers pointing as they tracked the pair cutting across the air. They're staring, Peter said dryly. Tiona glanced down, then laughed, utterly unconcerned. Let 'em. They released their swing well before the entrance, landing a short distance away on solid ground. Peter dismissed the webbing, and Tiona hopped down lightly, dusting herself off as if nothing about that approach had been unusual. From there, they walked up the path along the cliff toward the town entrance, side by side. They didn't talk much, there was no need to. The silence between them was easy, comfortable, punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps and the occasional shared glance. They walked on like that for a few more minutes, simply enjoying each other's presence, content without needing to fill every second with words. As they reached the entrance, the town came into view behind a rough wooden barricade, thick logs driven deep and lashed together into a crude but effective fortification. Watch platforms rose above it, and at the center sat a simple reinforced gate. A weathered board hung above the entrance, its letters carved deep and repainted countless times. Rivera 333. Peter slowed, eyes lingering on the number. What's with the count? Tiona glanced up and grinned. That's how many times Rivera's been rebuilt. 333. Peter repeated. Yup, every time it gets smashed, they fix it and bump the number, she said like it was no big deal. Peter frowned. How does a town get destroyed that many times? I thought this floor was supposed to be safe. It mostly is, Tiona said easily. Rivera's been around for hundreds of years. Monsters don't normally spawn here. She tilted her head, but sometimes they wander up from deeper floors. And once in a while, a few come down from above. She shrugged. Usually happens when something really stirs the dungeon up, like a big expedition party chasing monsters out of their territory. She didn't add that the Loki Familia had been responsible for a few of those rebuilds in recent years. Some things were better left unsaid. They passed through the gate and into Rivera itself. The town spread out across the cavern floor in a loose sprawl of wooden buildings and platforms, lit by glowing crystal lamps. Inns, taverns, smithies, and supply stalls crowded the paths, all built solid and practical, structures meant to be repaired, not admired. Adventurers packed the streets. Peter felt it immediately, the edge to the place. Scarred armor, hard eyes, loud voices. Groups laughed too loudly, arguments hovered just short of turning violent, and more than a few gazes lingered a second too long as they passed. It wasn't outright hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. Rivera felt rough, untamed, a place where rules bent easily. Tiona, on the other hand, looked perfectly at home. She stretched her arms and grinned. "Welcome to Rivera." Peter didn't answer right away. His gaze moved slowly across the crowd. Quite a few of them were watching them, subtle glances at first, then longer looks that lingered on the golden strands woven into his integrated armor, eyes assessing, measuring, weighing its worth. A few expressions sharpened with interest. Then recognition set in. When they noticed exactly who was walking beside him, heads turned away almost immediately. Conversations resumed a little too quickly. Eyes dropped. The attention vanished as if it had never been there. Peter let out a quiet breath. "Feels lively," he said at last. Tiona laughed. As they walked through town, Peter looked around with open curiosity. Rivera wasn't pretty, nothing about it tried to be, but it was built with purpose. Every structure looked easy to patch, easy to rebuild. Planks could be replaced, beams could be reinforced, a town designed with the expectation that something would go wrong. He heard the whispers as they passed. "Those are the ones who were flying." Flying, that looked more like swinging. "Who's the guy with the fancy armor? Isn't that the Loki Familia Crusher? I heard she lost to a level 1. What a load of crap. Like a level 1 would stand a chance against a Loki Familia monster." Peter kept his expression neutral, but he filed it away. So the rumors hadn't reached this deep yet. Or maybe people just didn't believe them. Tiona, for her part, seemed utterly unbothered. She walked with her usual easy confidence, hands behind her head, as if none of the murmurs even existed. They stopped in front of an inn, sturdy, well-worn, its sign creaking softly overhead. Tiona pushed the door open. They stepped inside. The inside of the inn matched the rest of Rivera. It wasn't cozy, no warm lighting, no attempt at charm. Just thick wooden tables scarred by knife marks, reinforced chairs, and walls lined with old weapons and cracked shields that looked more practical than decorative. The place was rough around the edges, but at least it was clean. Clean enough that Peter could relax a little. Behind the bar stood a cat person with tired eyes and an easy familiarity to his movements. "Tiona," he greeted, nodding once. "Villy," she replied cheerfully, lifting a hand. They took a table in the corner, backs to the wall. Peter noticed the subtle shift in the room as they sat, patrons glancing over, then pretending not to stare. Discreet looks, quiet curiosity. A waiter came by and placed menus in front of them. Peter glanced down, and promptly froze. "These prices," he muttered. "Deep underground, limited supplies." He supposed it made sense. Tiona didn't even blink. She leaned back and started ordering without hesitation, rattling off dishes like she'd eaten here 100 times before. They chatted easily while they waited, the low murmur of the inn filling the pauses. Eventually, Peter tilted his head, a question forming. "Don't the people here ever go back up to the surface?" "Some do," Tiona said. "Most don't." "Why?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Some folks here have bounties on their heads. Some got kicked out of their familias. Some just don't want anything to do with them anymore." She shrugged. "Anyone who settles here for good usually has a reason not to go back up." Peter absorbed that quietly. Their food arrived soon after. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. It wasn't anything like the meals at the Hostess of Fertility or Hero's Heaven. No refinement, no elegance, but it wasn't bad either, simple, hearty, filling. Street food, more or less. Peter took another bite, letting the flavors settle. It was rough, straightforward, nothing fancy, but honest in its own way. Across from him, Tiona was already digging in, completely at ease. For a moment, Peter just watched, then followed suit. Bell was fighting war shadows on the 6th floor. His enchanted knife cut through them with ease, dark forms dispersing under each strike. He still had to respect their long reach and knife-like claws, but his agility had improved dramatically over the past few days, and these monsters no longer felt dangerous. 3 days ago, he'd nearly died to them. Now, he was deep inside the 6th floor, moving with confidence. Earlier, he'd watched a Ganesha Familia convoy making its way upward toward the surface, armed adventurers escorting reinforced carriages, captured monsters secured inside iron-barred cages. As they advanced, they chased monsters away from their path, driving them deeper into the floor. Belle had been forced to move deeper in because of it. The entire city was gearing up for monsterphilia. Even the guild was short-staffed. That morning, when Belle had gone to submit the Familia Captain registration form, Aina hadn't been at her desk. When he asked about her, a board clerk had taken the form from his hands and answered without looking up. Monsterphilia duty. Belle pushed the thought aside and kept fighting. He knew he'd promised Peter not to go below the 6th floor. Still, this place felt easy now. Too easy, Belle thought, cutting down yet another war shadow. Then suddenly pain exploded through his left shoulder. Belle gasped as something yanked hard, the dungeon itself seeming to mock him. In his overconfidence, he hadn't been paying attention. A frog shooter. Its long tongue was wrapped tight around his shoulder. Belle reacted instantly, slashing at the tongue as it began to retract. Using the pull, he launched himself forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His knife plunged straight into the center of the monster's single, bulging eye. The frog shooter collapsed. Belle landed hard, breathing fast. He hissed, then fumbled for a healing potion, splashing it over the bleeding wound. Warmth spread as the pain faded. Idiot, he muttered under his breath. He'd gotten careless. In just a few days, he'd grown used to having Peter watching his back, someone who seemed to notice everything, who always moved before danger struck. Someone who made it easy to forget how dangerous things really were. Peter had been right. Belle wasn't ready for the deeper floors yet. After some time, Belle's bag was full with crystals and monster drops, and he decided to call it a day. As he made his way back up the floor, he noticed it was still eerily empty of monsters. It didn't take long to see why. He caught up to the Ganesha Familia convoy and began passing it, then kept passing it. And passing it. Damn, it was long. And slow-moving. Hauling cages and carriages upward through the dungeon clearly wasn't easy. A minotaur roared from within one of the reinforced cages as Belle went by. His body stiffened on instinct, the memory of his near-death encounter with one of its kin flashing vividly through his mind. He forced himself to keep walking. His thoughts drifted, unbidden, to Ice Wallenstein, the Sword Princess. The way she had apologized to him instead of accepting his thanks still made his face feel warm. Just thinking about his brief conversation with her was enough to make his heart race. He climbed on, step by step, until the stone passage finally gave way to the familiar interior of Babel Tower. Standing just beside the dungeon entrance, clipboard in hand, was Aina. "Miss Aina," he greeted her. Aina looked up from her clipboard, eyes widening for a split second before she smiled. "Belle, you're back already?" "Yeah, I was heading up when I saw you here." He glanced at the dungeon entrance, then at the long line of cages being hauled past. What are you doing down here?" "Cataloging," she said, tapping the board lightly. "The Ganesha Familia is transporting captured monsters to the surface. I have to record each one." Belle watched another carriage crawl past, wheels groaning. "At this speed, you'll be here all day." She sighed. "Unfortunately, I can stay for a while," he offered quickly. "If you want, just keep you company." Aina hesitated. "Belle, I'm on duty. I won't get in the way," he said, waving his hands. "I'll just sit nearby, I promise." She studied him for a moment, then softened. "Well, I suppose that would be all right. Thank you." They settled into quiet conversation as the steady flow of adventurers moved around them. After a few minutes, Aina's gaze drifted to his left arm. "Your sleeve is torn." Belle looked down. "Oh, that. What happened?" "A frog shooter," he admitted. "I wasn't paying enough attention." Aina frowned. "You should be more careful, Mr. Cronell. Honestly, I'm starting to think Mr. Parker is a bad influence on you. You're taking risks you shouldn't be taking. You shouldn't be diving that deep yet." "But, Miss Aina," Belle said, lowering his voice, "most of my stats are already F. And my agility is E." She froze. "That's impossible. Stats don't grow that fast." "I know," Belle whispered. "That's why I think something's wrong. Or, different." He hesitated. "Goddess Hestia and Peter both act like it's nothing. They ignore me when I bring it up." His voice dipped further. "I think they're hiding something from me." Aina's expression sharpened. She glanced around, making sure no one nearby was paying them any attention. Adventurers passed, talking loudly, focused on the convoy. Only then did she lean closer. If they are hiding something, she said softly, it's probably for the best that you don't know. Belle blinked. You can't lie to gods, she continued in a near whisper. So maybe they're protecting you. After all, you can't reveal something you don't know. The convoy kept moving past them, chains clinking, wheels groaning as the monsters were hauled towards Orario. Belle went quiet, Aina's words settling heavily in his chest. And Belle was left wondering what, exactly, his goddess and his captain were so determined to keep from him. Tiona guided Peter through the wide, open expanse of the 18th floor, the two of them swinging effortlessly beneath the crystal formations. They landed beside a natural lagoon fed by a clear spring. Water spilled gently into the basin, catching the ambient light and scattering it into soft, shimmering patterns. The place felt untouched, serene, like the floor itself had decided to take a deep breath here. Peter paused, impressed despite himself, then crouched and filled a bottle. Tiona watched him with a curious tilt of her head. So, she said casually, who told you about this spring? You're not exactly knowledgeable about the 18th floor. Naza, Peter replied, from Blue Pharmacy. She gave me a quest to bring back some of the water once she found out I was coming down here. Tiona raised a brow, mock serious. Oh, taking quests from another girl during our date? Peter froze. Wait, it's not like that. Her familia's kind of close to Hestia familia. Our gods are friends. I couldn't really say no, even though I wanted to. She burst out laughing. Relax, I'm teasing. Her grin softened. I really don't mind. She pulled out her canteen, dumped the remaining water without hesitation, and held it under the spring. Actually, I'll take some too. You should really taste it, she added. Peter took a drink from his bottle. The effect was immediate. Warmth spread through his chest, his fatigue fading like it had never been there. His limbs felt lighter, his breathing steadier, refreshed, energized in a way no potion had ever quite managed. Whoa, he murmured. That's incredible. Tiona smiled, pleased. Loki Familia kitchens use it for everything. Drinks, soups, even tea. Our adventurers pass through here all the time, so we always stock up. Peter slipped off his boots and sat at the edge of the lagoon. A moment later, Tiona joined him. They let their bare feet dangle into the clear water, gentle ripples spreading around their toes. For a while, neither of them spoke. Peter leaned back, eyes drifting upward. Did the light change? Yeah, Tiona rested on her hands, feet swaying lazily. The crystals up there mimic the surface sky. When it's night above, it looks like stars down here. She shot him a sideways glance, eyes bright. We could stay for a bit. Maybe even take a bath. This water's got rejuvenating properties, great for the skin. Peter froze, just slightly. I don't exactly have a bathing suit. Tiona blinked, then grinned. We could always go naked. Peter turned red instantly. Tiona, she burst out laughing. Relax, I'm kidding, mostly. She flashed him a teasing grin and added lightly, but hey, you're my boyfriend. So it'd be fine, right? Peter's face heated up instantly. He opened his mouth, closed it, then cleared his throat. Well, maybe, he said carefully. I just think there might be risks. She blinked. Risks. He hesitated, then gestured vaguely around them. A peeping Tom. The word hit her a second later. Oh, her imagination immediately betrayed her, an image of Loki somehow watching, grinning far too knowingly. Tiona's face flushed almost as red as Belle's ever did. Yeah, she admitted quickly. That would be really awkward. They stared at each other for half a heartbeat, and then both laughed, the tension breaking like glass. When the laughter faded, Peter shifted closer and rested a hand gently against her back. The contact was warm, steady, sincere. I'm sorry if I'm taking things slower than you'd like, he said quietly. I just want to do this right. Tiona laughed softly and nudged him with her shoulder. Oh, you're such a gentleman, she said. You're lucky I'm not like most Amazons. They aren't exactly known for patience. He smiled back. Then I should probably make it up to you. They leaned in, sharing a slow, gentle kiss, unhurried, comfortable, full of warmth. Their feet brushed beneath the water as the crystal sky shimmered above them, the world quiet and unintrusive for just a little while longer. Chapter 22 Invaluable. Peter and Tiona made swift progress as they headed upward through the dungeon. They swung cleanly through the empty 17th floor, momentum carrying them straight into the 16th. Monsters barely had time to react before they were cut down, Tiona's movements sharp and practiced, Peter a blur of motion. The only thing that slowed them was Peter pausing to extract magic stones from the fallen creatures. Midway through the 16th floor, Jane's voice sounded quietly through the earpiece embedded in Peter's mask. Detecting abnormal radiation from the wall ahead, Peter's HUD flickered, highlighting a small, irregular patch along the stone surface. Is anything about to spawn? Peter whispered instinctively. Tiona still caught it. She glanced over at him, brows knitting with curiosity. Negative. No significant X-ray activity detected. Jane paused briefly. However, trace gamma radiation is present, along with faint neutron and electromagnetic irregularities. The pattern is inconsistent with natural dungeon formations. The source warrants further investigation. Peter slowed, eyes fixed on the highlighted section. Gamma radiation, neutron traces. His scientific curiosity flared instantly. He stepped closer to the wall as Tiona watched him openly now, curiosity written all over her face. He glanced at Tiona's dagger. For half a second, his fingers twitched toward it, then stopped. It was a high-level weapon, yes, but still borrowed. He wasn't about to risk damaging something she trusted him with. Instead, he drew back his fist and punched. Stone cracked apart with a sharp report, fragments scattering across the floor. From the broken cavity, a dark, heavy lump tumbled out and hit the ground with a dull clang. Peter picked it up, turning it over in his hand. Radiation signatures confirmed, Jane said. Matches previous readings. Tiona stared at the broken wall, then at the ore, then at Peter. How did you know that was in there? She shook her head before he could answer. Never mind. Guess that's one of your secrets. The words landed lightly, but Peter still felt a small pang of guilt at keeping so much hidden from his girlfriend. Do you know what this is? He asked, holding it out. Tiona took the lump, weighing it in her palm. Looks like a metal ore. Sometimes rare ones show up in the dungeon. She tilted it, inspecting the surface. I'm not great with metals, so I can't say what kind exactly. But finding something like this in the middle floors. She whistled softly. That's pretty rare. Peter nodded and stowed it carefully in his bag. They resumed their ascent, choosing paths where the ceilings rose higher, letting Peter swing freely and maximize their speed as they climbed toward the upper floors. They resumed their ascent. Whenever the ceilings rose higher, Peter swung freely, Tiona riding securely on his back as they pushed their speed to the limit, climbing toward the upper floors in long, effortless arcs. By the time they reached the 15th floor, Peter veered toward a side passage. The floor exits that way, Tiona said, pointing ahead. I know, Peter replied. But we can take a shortcut. Earlier, he'd quietly asked Jane to trace the shaft they'd jumped down before. Now, its route glowed faintly on his HUD, guiding him off the main path. Tiona followed without protest, curiosity clearly getting the better of her. Then she saw it, a jagged hole gaped in the ceiling above them. Peter stopped beneath it. Hop on. Tiona didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him just as Peter fired a web upward and yanked them both skyward, shooting cleanly through the opening and landing on the 13th floor in a smooth arc. Tiona burst out laughing. You know, adventurers usually use those shafts to go down faster. That's the first time I've ever seen one used to climb up. Peter straightened, a hint of a grin in his voice. Hey, shortcuts work both ways. From the 12th to the 10th floor, Peter barely slowed down. He swung straight through the fog, Tiona clinging to his back, webs snapping out to snare any bad bats that dared swoop toward them. Tiona laughed against his shoulder. This is the fastest ascent I've ever had. What? Are you in a hurry to end our date? We're running late, Peter replied, not missing a beat as he fired another web. I really don't want my goddess giving me a lecture. Tiona snorted. Wow, must be serious if you're scared of your own goddess. I'm not scared, Peter said quickly. She just gets whiny. And if she's displeased, there's usually a tantrum involved. I prefer not dealing with that. Tiona burst out laughing. You know, Loki was complaining about your goddess yesterday, said she completely ruined the banquet. Peter laughed too. That's funny. Hestia said the exact same thing about your goddess. Tiona howled. Figures. Then, after a moment, she added more thoughtfully, you know, it's almost impossible for members of rival familias to date like this. Peter huffed a quiet laugh. I tend to do the impossible pretty often. So humble, Tiona teased. Peter shrugged, even mid-swing. Hey, if I ever start underselling myself, that's when you should worry. By the time they reached the entrance to the 9th floor, the ceilings dipped low enough that swinging was no longer practical. Peter touched down lightly, and from there they continued on foot. The upper floors passed quickly. They moved with practiced efficiency, striking straight for the monster cores, clean blows that shattered them instantly, bodies collapsing into dust. No wasted motion, no delays. Before long, the familiar stone arches of the first floor came into view. That was when they spotted the convoy. A line of heavy carriages creaked along the main passage, reinforced frames stacked high with bound monsters. Members of the Ganesha Familia walked alongside them, alert but unhurried, escorting the hull toward the surface for the upcoming monsterphilia. Peter slowed, gaze lingering on the procession. Chains clinked softly as a captured monster shifted inside one of the cages. Tiona followed his line of sight. Ganesha Familia, she said. Looks like they're already moving the monsters up. Peter nodded. Monsterphilia prep, yeah, Tiona confirmed. Then, after a beat, she glanced at him sideways. You should come with me. He blinked. To monsterphilia, she grinned. Obviously. Peter let out a small laugh. That'd make it our third date in a week. Tiona raised a brow. Getting bored of me already? I didn't say no, Peter replied quickly. I just usually take things a little slower. Usually. Tiona latched onto the word immediately. How many girls have you dated before me? Peter hesitated. That's kind of another one of my secrets. Tiona scoffed and gave his arm a playful shove. The next thing Peter knew, he slammed into the stone wall, cracks spider webbing out from the impact. Wait, why didn't that trigger my spider sense? He thought, momentarily stunned. Tiona froze. Oops. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you that hard. Peter slid down the wall slightly, rubbing his shoulder. It's fine, he said, fighting a grin. I'm not hurt, but next time, please remember, I'm just a lowly level 1. One of the Ganesha Familia adventurers laughed out loud. You're anything but a lowly level 1. Recognizing the voice, Peter looked over, and smiled. He reached up and pulled off his mask. Hashana, he asked. The adventurer chuckled and removed his elephant mask. That'd be me. Peter stepped forward and offered his hand. Didn't expect to run into you down here. Hashana clasped it firmly. Seems we keep crossing paths. He then turned toward Tiona, grin widening. And hello to you, lass. Do take it easy on your boyfriend there, try not to break him. Tiona snorted. No promises. Peter glanced past them at the line of cages rolling toward the surface. So, what kind of monsters do you usually take up for monsterphilia? Hashana followed his gaze. Nothing too dangerous, he said easily. Level 3 monsters are the upper limit. Anything stronger's off the table. He gestured toward the convoy as they walked. No flyers, no fire breathers. Hellhounds, for example, absolutely not. Anything that could threaten the audience stays in the dungeon. Peter nodded. Makes sense. Hashana stopped beside one of the reinforced cages and motioned them closer. Inside rested a large, mantis-shaped creature of living crystal, its faceted body gleaming softly as it caught the dungeon light, prismatic colors flowing and shifting across its surface like stained glass. A beauty, isn't it? Hashana said with clear pride. Crystal mantis, rare find. Peter leaned in, eyes widening slightly. We broke its wings, Hashana added calmly. Keeps it from flying, makes it safe enough to showcase. Tiona whistled softly. You don't see those every day. Peter straightened, gaze lingering on the creature a moment longer before the convoy began moving again. Monsterphilia was going to be more interesting than he'd expected. Hashana burst out laughing, the sound echoing down the corridor. 2, 3, if you count the afterparty. He wiped at his eyes. Lord Ganesha hosts a banquet for the gods before monsterphilia starts. Big, loud, the usual. The adventurers usually throw together an afterparty with whatever's left over. Then he grinned and continued, and after monsterphilia, we hold our own proper party. These few days keep us running non-stop, so once it's over, we unwind. After exchanging goodbyes with Hashana, Peter and Tiona continued upward. Beyond the dungeon exit, the winding stone stairs leading to the surface were already crowded with slow-moving carriages. The Ganesha Familia had laid wooden planks along the steps, turning the climb into a makeshift ramp for the heavy loads. Peter paused to watch the operation, brow creasing. Wouldn't it be easier to set up a crane at the circular opening at the top? He mused. Just lift the carriages straight up. The entrance was already packed, adventurers squeezing past the convoy wherever they could, so Peter angled toward the line, bracing himself for the long, slow climb back toward Orario. Tiona glanced up the winding stairs, then back at him. So, why aren't we swinging straight to the surface? Peter shrugged. My goddess, and Aina, keep telling me to keep a low profile. Tiona tilted her head. Aina, Peter grinned. She's this hot half-elf. Advisor to Belle. Tiona stared at him for half a second, then burst out laughing. Wow, you really don't know when to stop, do you? Peter lifted his hands innocently. Hey, I was just being honest. Tiona looked at him with a mischievous smirk. If you're not swinging us up, she said lightly, then I will. Peter frowned. What do you Maya? He took a step back, instinct screaming. He really didn't like that expression. Too late, Tiona swept him up into a bridal carry as if he weighed nothing. Tiona. Hey, she slammed her foot into the stone and jumped. The stairwell thundered. Cracks spider webbed across the stone floor as a sharp shockwave burst outward, cloaks and hair of nearby adventurers snapping back as they were nearly thrown off their feet. Then they were airborne, shot upward like a launched projectile. She rebounded off the circular staircase with frightening precision, one push, then another, clearly tracing a route only she could see. 3 massive leaps later, they slammed onto the upper level inside the base of Babel Tower. The echo rang out, conversations died mid-sentence, dozens of heads turned. Peter was still in her arms. The realization hit him a second later. Heat rushed to his face. He stared straight ahead, as if acknowledging reality would make it worse. Tiona, he said carefully, through clenched dignity, I asked for some warning next time you pulled off something like this. She looked down at him, utterly pleased. Warning, she laughed. You looked like you were thinking too hard. I helped. She set him back on his feet as if nothing unusual had happened. Peter opened his mouth to reply, then froze. Aina was sitting on the stone floor right in front of them. Flat on her bum, her hair was slightly disheveled, her glasses a bit crooked, and her clipboard rested a short distance away, papers messy and jumbled, clear evidence that their dramatic arrival had completely bowled her over. Hi, Aina, Peter said weakly. Tiona stared for half a second, then snorted. Aina adjusted her glasses, pushed herself up, and deliberately righted her clipboard, straightening the papers with painstaking precision. Every movement was slow, controlled, and painfully composed. Peter swallowed. He could almost see her aura flaring. Once she stood, her glasses caught the light as she fixed him with her trademark glare, still perfectly professional, despite everything. Mr. Parker, she said evenly, why am I not surprised? Peter rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry about that. We didn't mean to. Aina raised a hand, stopping him. She took a moment to straighten her clipboard, then looked at Tiona, recognition flickering across her face. Crusher, she said, tone perfectly level. Tiona grinned, utterly unapologetic. You landed really well, though. Very controlled fall. Aina adjusted her glasses, the lenses caught the light, flashing with an ominous glare. Next time, she said evenly, please refrain from using the dungeon entrance as a landing zone. Aina exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of her nose. If you'll excuse me, she said, already turning away, I'm on duty, I've had a very long day, and I don't need any more excitement. She headed back toward the staircase, where the Ganesha Familia were finishing hauling up another carriage. Tiona watched her go, then leaned toward Peter with a grin. I get it now, she is hot, and kinda scary too, especially for an unblessed person. For a second there, I thought she was going to slap us with a fine. Peter blinked. Wait, she can do that. Tiona nodded. The guild can, if adventurers break the rules. But don't worry, she smirked, I don't think they've written anything about launching out of the dungeon yet. She laughed. Though, give it a few days. That might change. Peter let out a breath. Good to know we're one bad idea away from inspiring new regulations. Tiona laughed. We'd make history. Yeah, he said, as they walked out of the Babel Tower. Let's try not to do that today. A short while later, they arrived at the guild. The place was unusually crowded, short-staffed because of monsterphilia preparations, with long lines at every exchange counter. Peter pulled his mask back over his face, earning a curious glance from Tiona. They joined the line at Tom, the cat-person clerk's counter. Tiona leaned slightly to the side. I don't really need a share. Peter shook his head. I could never have gone that deep without you. So you get half of the collection. She didn't object. The drops from the middle floors weren't much to a first-class adventurer like herself, but she was curious about the black ore. When they finally reached the counter, Peter emptied everything into the exchange box. Tom's eyes immediately narrowed at the dark lump. He picked it up and examined it with a small jeweler's loupe, tilting it to catch the light. "This," he murmured, awe creeping into his voice, "this is pure mithril ore." He tapped the stone lightly. "I can give 2 million valis for this." Tiona leaned closer to Peter and whispered, "You'd get a much better deal selling that directly to blacksmiths. The guild always undervalues rare ores like this." Peter nodded. "Good point." He asked Tom to return the ore. Tom gave him the ore back, his expression tightening into a slight frown, but he handed it over without protest. Peter then asked him to assess the rest of the collection. After a few moments, Tom spoke. "Total comes to 312,100 valis." Tiona caught a low, deliberate voice coming from inside Peter's mask. She had heard it a few times in the dungeon, and now here again. Peter's voice, calm and precise, followed. "Actually, there's a calculation mistake. The total is 314,200 valis." To her surprise, the guild clerk didn't argue at all, he simply recalculated and accepted Peter's number immediately. She blinked, impressed and a little bewildered. Tom silently adjusted the numbers, then handed over the exact amount Peter had stated, divided into 2 pouches as he had requested. Peter gave one to Tiona, who accepted it quietly. Tom silently handed over the exact amount Peter had stated, divided into 2 pouches as he had requested. Peter gave one to Tiona, who accepted it quietly. As they moved away from the counter, Peter held up the ore. "We should split this too." Tiona opened her mouth to refuse, but she knew Peter would insist. Besides, she could sell the mithril to the Goibniu Familia and get a good deal toward her loan for remaking her erga. She glanced around and, with a sly grin, pulled Peter into one of the private booths in the guild. She drew the curtains closed, piquing his curiosity. Taking the ore from him, she flexed her fingers, and, with surprising strength, tore it cleanly in 2 halves with her bare hands. Then, she tossed Peter one of the halves, the slightly larger one, with a playful smile. Peter caught it, wide-eyed. Thanks. That was impressive." Tiona shrugged nonchalantly, as if splitting rare mithril ore by hand was an everyday occurrence. As they stepped out of the guild, the sun was dipping low, painting Orario in warm golds and oranges. Peter let out a contented sigh. "I had a wonderful time today, now I'd better head back to my goddess." Tiona smiled. "Same here. So, we're meeting up for Monstrophilia?" Peter grinned. "Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it." Suddenly, Tiona pulled him into a quick hug and pressed a soft, fleeting kiss to his lips. Then, with a teasing smile, she stepped back. "See you soon," she said. Peter watched her go, the warmth of the kiss lingering. A quiet smile tugged at his lips as he set off toward home. Back at the Hestia Familia home, in the basement of the abandoned church, the 3 of them gathered together as the day finally wound down. Hestia leaned back, still carrying the calm of her visit. "I had a wonderful time at Demeter's place. She has her own spa in her villa. A long bath, good food, it was relaxing." Peter nodded. "Sounds like you needed it." Her expression grew more measured. "But, she was very curious about you." "I did expect it, though. All the gods are curious about you." Then the seriousness melted away, and Hestia's usual cheer returned. She leaned forward with a grin. "So, how was your date? Did the under-resort live up to the hype?" Peter nodded, his tone softening as he spoke. He described the 18th floor, the vast crystal-lit sky overhead, the warm light spreading across grass and forests that shouldn't exist in the dungeon. Trees heavy with fruit, clear natural lagoons and the town of Rivera. "It didn't feel like the dungeon at all," he finished. Bell was practically leaning off his seat. "So that's the under-resort, I've heard about it, but I never imagined it like that." "You'll see it yourself someday," Peter said. Bell straightened. "I hope I can go down there soon." Peter smiled faintly. "You'll need to reach level 2 first." Bell clenched his fists, eyes shining. "Then I'll strive harder, I'll get stronger." Hestia frowned. "Just remember to be careful." Bell deflated slightly. "Yes, goddess." She stretched lightly. "All right, time for your status update." Bell took off his shirt and lay face down on the bed. Hestia sat on his back as usual, placing her hand against his skin while she updated his falna. The familiar light traced the divine script as she worked. A moment later, she finished and printed the status sheet. "Here," she said, handing it to Bell. "Bell Cronell. LV. 1. Strength. F335, E428. Endurance, F320, E412. Dexterity, F342, E430. Agility, E460, D585. Mind, I0. Magic, opening square bracket closing square bracket. Skills, opening square bracket closing square bracket. Then Hestia called Peter over. "Alright, your turn." Peter lay down on the bed, and she repeated the process, placing her hand against his back as his fauna updated. She paused slightly. "Huh," Peter glanced back. "Something wrong?" "No," Hestia said, "it's just that you've gained a lot of high-level Excelia." Peter frowned slightly. "But the monsters were weaker than me." Hestia shook her head lightly. "Even so, your fauna recognized them as higher-level opponents than you. That's why you gained high-level Excelia." Peter went still. "So that's how it works." Excelia was granted based on the difficulty of the challenge faced. That meant the fauna wasn't measuring his actual strength, it was measuring the gap between his level and the enemies he fought. And officially, he was still just a low-level one. His spider powers weren't truly part of the fauna. They came from another universe entirely. The fauna probably couldn't factor them in properly. It was like running a game with an external mod installed. The character might be stronger, faster, completely broken, but the base system still calculated experience based on level difference. So as far as the fauna was concerned, he was fighting above his weight class. "Yeah, that tracks." Hestia finished the update, printed the sheet, and handed it over. Peter Parker, LV, 1, Strength, I-17, I-33, Endurance, I-2, I-4, Dexterity, I-18, I-36, Agility, I-21, I-59, Mind, I-62, H-102, Magic, Arachnostrand, no chant magic, shoot webs from hands. Skills, spider powers, abilities akin to a spider's natural capabilities. Spider sense, can sense danger. Peter studied the sheet for a moment, noting that one of his stats had finally crossed into H. He said nothing, simply handing the paper over to Bell. Bell took it and frowned as he compared it to his own. Even with so-called high-level Excelia, Peter's overall growth was far lower than his. That realization lingered, and yet, neither his goddess nor Peter seemed to pay any attention to his abnormal growth at all. Bell folded the sheet carefully, his thoughts drifting back to Aina's words, about stats that shouldn't grow this fast, about things better left unknown. If Hestia and Peter really were hiding something, then maybe it wasn't meant to harm him. Maybe it was meant to protect him. His grip tightened just a little as resolve settled in. Whatever the truth was, he would live up to the numbers staring back at him, whether he understood them or not. Loki Familia, Finn's office. Finn, Loki, Gareth, and Rivria sat across the table from Tiona. The way they were all facing her made it feel less like a meeting and more like an interrogation. A rough lump of mithril ore rested on the table between them. Finn folded his hands. "Let's summarize. Peter can predict monster spawn points ahead of time. His reflexes are exceptional, and somehow, he located mithril ore in the middle floors." Gareth crossed his arms. "That part's almost unheard of. Rare metals don't show up that high. Not unless you're absurdly lucky, or something else is at work." Finn nodded and continued, "And then there's the guild." The teller accepted Peter's valuation of the drops without a single objection. His gaze settled on Tiona. "Is that everything you noticed? You're certain you didn't miss anything?" Tiona scowled. "I told you everything I noticed about his abilities." Loki leaned back in her chair, lips curling into a smirk. "Lie, you're still holding something back." Tiona sighed heavily. She hated this. Was it really going to be like this after every date? "Fine," Tiona said at last. "He was wearing a mask. And sometimes, I heard a quiet voice coming from it. I couldn't make out the words, but someone was definitely speaking to him under the mask." Gareth frowned. "Maybe it's that spirit tomato boy was talking about." Rivria shot him a flat look. "Have you already forgotten that I've spent decades studying spirits? They do not function like that." Finn rested his chin on his folded hands. "Perhaps what Bell and Peter refer to as a spirit isn't the same as what we understand by the term. People tend to romanticize the unknown and attach familiar myths to it. The Krazo bloodline, for example, many believed spirits dwelled within their blades." Rivria shook her head immediately. "That is inaccurate. Spirits did not reside within the weapons. They merely empowered the blacksmiths themselves. Whatever this is, it is not a spirit. Finn glanced at her. Then do you have another theory? Riveria's eyes narrowed slightly. A communication device. Something akin to the magic communication crystals developed by SV Al Andromeda of Hermes Familia. Gareth turned back to Tiona. What do you think? Tiona snapped, irritation clear in her voice. I don't know. I said I couldn't tell. That's everything I know. Can I go now? Finn glanced sideways at Loki. Loki gave a short nod. She's not lying. Finn leaned back in his chair. If Peter truly has the ability to locate rare metals in the dungeon, that makes him invaluable. Gareth rumbled in agreement. I've heard old rumors. A dwarf from Hera Familia, said to possess a skill that could locate rare ores. Some believed he was the real reason Hera and Zeus Familia could outfit all their adventurers with adamantite and orichalcum gear. Even their magic users carried mithril weapons. Loki whistled low. Hey, that just makes me want this Peter guy even more. Finn turned back to Tiona, his tone noticeably gentler. Could you pass along a message to him? He gave her a small, reassuring smile. Loki Familia is interested in discussing a potential arrangement. We'll be launching expeditions soon to settle our debt. If he's willing to cooperate, we'd welcome him to join us. His gaze flicked briefly to the mithril ore on the table. In return, he would receive a fair percentage of any ores he helps us locate. Tell him I'd like to speak with him personally. I'm certain we can draft a contract that benefits both sides. Tiona stared at him for a long moment. An hour. She'd been sitting there for nearly an hour, questioned from every angle like she'd done something wrong. Fine, she said at last, the word clipped. Can I leave now? Finn gave a small nod. That was all the permission she needed. She snatched up the ore, spun on her heel, and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make it rattle in its frame. She didn't particularly care if she damaged the captain's door. She was in a foul mood, and right now, she really wanted to scream or hit something very hard. She made it up to her room and froze as soon as she opened the door. The girls of the Familia were sprawled inside like they owned the place. One look told her everything. This wasn't an ambush, but it was definitely another interrogation. Tiona felt the urge to snap rise up again. But instead of lashing out, she took a breath and forced a smile. Smile, she told herself. Always smile, no matter how hard it gets. Besides, these were her friends. They weren't here to dissect Peter's abilities or pry into his secrets. They just wanted to gossip about the romantic moments from her date. And she refused to let the captain, the goddess and the executives ruin what had been a wonderful day. With that thought in mind, Tiona stepped into the room, wearing a bright smile. And this is the end of part 11 of this amazing crossover, What If? Do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.